Hello and welcome to Thursday here on Viking TV. Whether you're watching now live or much later in the week, it's a very special day today for Viking lovers because today is the 24th birthday of Viking river cruises. Literally on this day, 24 years ago, the first river longboat set off in Russia and so started a whole new story and a whole new journey for the chairman, Torstein Hagen, and the company. But this week is also hugely important for Viking because it marks the return of river cruises after a long year and a half away, with the first cruises up and down the rivers Douro, Rhine and Seine. Perhaps you're even on board a Viking longship right now watching this. If you are, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. So on what must be a pretty emotional day for Viking people, who better to introduce you to now than someone who is a very special friend to Viking and a godmother to the longship Viking Herja, I think that's how you say it, an extraordinary woman who can express emotions in music and so create marvellous pieces that aren't just wonderful to listen to and watch, because I love to watch orchestras and pianists and soloists, but pieces that stick in your mind too. Now, if you want a great example of that, just have a look and a listen to this. I promise you, and you know it, don't you? You're going to be humming that all day now. You probably already know her, but just in case you don't, let me proudly introduce you to Viking Godmother, Classic FM's composer in residence, and someone who is such a British institution nowadays. She's an OBE, and that's Debbie Wiseman. Hello, Debbie, and welcome.
Hello, Anne. So lovely to see you. This is very exciting.
Yeah, it really is, because I've heard your music so much, especially recently in the last year and a half. And it's just wonderful to see you in person. How are you? How's it been for you?
It's been okay. You know, it as with everything, things have changed dramatically. The way we communicate, having these lovely sessions online. A lot of music has been still written during the lockdown, I'm happy to say, and we've been recording, albeit socially distanced, but we've been managing all right. You know, we've been able to continue. Musicians, I think, are quite resourceful. You know, they find ways around things, and that's what we've been doing, like everybody else, finding ways around things.
So did you sort of set out, when we were all told we were going into lockdown and travel would be almost impossible, etc., etc., did you think, right, well, this is the year that I'm really going to get down to some work and do some composing, because that at least you can do on your own?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Today I'm in my music room where I do all my writing, and this is where I work. This is my office, really, I suppose. And it is a solitary job. Composing, of course it is. You're just with yourself, like any writer, you know, you have to be inspired by what's going on. I generally have a film to work with, or a TV show, or a project, an album. So I have a concept, but then of course all the writing is done at the piano. Yeah. But the recording, of course, is what's important, because until you know, it's just black dots on a page when I write it. It's little. People think it's Chinese language, you know, these little black dots on a stave, and what does it mean? You know, it's a language. But until musicians actually perform it and play it and breathe life into it, if they're performing it live or in a recording studio, it doesn't exist as anything except black dots on a page. So you do need to have it recorded. And the recording studios did close for many months while we were in lockdown. But they've gradually opened, and I have been recording now with socially distanced orchestras, all the musicians 2 meters apart. As you've probably seen now in concerts that they have been streaming, the musicians don't sit as closely together as they used to. And it does have an effect on the way they play. It's interesting, but at least we've kept going.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, it's one thing for a violinist to be playing on his own or whatever, 2 meters apart. But one of my sons is a saxophonist,
Oh.
and frankly, there's nothing but vapor everywhere when he starts blowing on his sax. So, I mean, wind instruments and things like that must give you a special hazard. Do they have to be even more socially distanced than others?
They do. Yes, they put them behind screens, but they have been doing tests on, as you say, the vapors that are expelled through playing a woodwind instrument or a brass instrument. Actually, they've been finding that it's no different really to somebody speaking loudly or shouting. So it doesn't really make that much difference. So we put them behind screens, they're 2 meters apart and they play as normal, thank goodness for that. And you know, they are so happy to be playing. All the musicians are so thrilled to be back playing again and doing what they love.
I'll bet, because I mean, they literally, especially if your whole business is playing inside an orchestra for a year and a bit, you have not been able to do that. You haven't been able to be with other musicians, hear them around you, do your job.
Exactly. It's absolutely essential that music can start again and start up again, and that orchestras can play again, because musicians, they need that social interaction with others, and they need to make music. That's what they've been trained to do, usually from a very early age, maybe from the age of 5, 6, 7. And they've dedicated their life to it. And then it's literally like switching off. It was like switching off a tap. They had huge, you know, concerts in their diaries, recording sessions, events, all these things. Suddenly their diaries were completely emptied. And so they, you know, luckily, as I say, they're resourceful, they practice, they do other things, found ways to make music online or meet other musicians online. And slowly but surely, I'm happy to say, it's coming back.
It does feel as though it's coming back.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't just work on your own, as you would maybe have us believe there, you know, writing away your little dots on a stave or sitting at the piano. You love to collaborate with other artists. I mean, there are so many recent works you've done where you've collaborated with actors, with speakers, people who've written novels, and or directors who want you to write music for their movies. And usually you sit down and talk with them and collaborate. Has that been a problem for you?
Well, that's also changed. You're absolutely right. I love the collaboration, because otherwise it's quite a lonely job being a composer. You're at the piano on your own or whatever, however you write, at a desk. And until you actually share that music with others, either with musicians or with a director or an artist, it doesn't come to life, and you can't hear it, you don't enjoy it. So music is about sharing, and that's really the key to it. So yes, I have done a couple of films now where the directors have had to listen to the music on Zoom, and I've been sitting at the piano and playing, this is the main theme, this is the idea, because we haven't been able to meet in person. Or I send them demos, MP3s, or I send them digital copies of the music. And we found ways around it, you know, found ways around of not being able to be in the same room and not being able to share the music together in a group. And like everybody else,
have commented, haven't they, that thank goodness at least it was terrible that this last year and a half or so has happened, and of course it's not over yet. But what if it had happened before the days of digital communication? What on earth would we have done? Just like
exactly that. I know. Zoom has been, you know, my best friend for the past year and a half.
Have you had any funny moments on it though? Because I have, with people coming in upside down or sideways and not being able to do anything about it. You've had to have sideways conversations with people.
Well, exactly. And we all had to learn on the job, didn't we? I mean, it wasn't anything we'd had particular experience of before this happened. But I was writing a piece for the wonderful cellist Sibelius. I don't know if you know him.
Yes, I
He's
do.
just a fabulous player.
Lovely book called Why Beethoven Threw the Stew.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
Funny
Yes.
stories about musicians. Yes, I love Sibelius.
Fantastic. And I was commissioned to write a piece for cello and piano for Classic FM. And the idea was it was a new piece of music that would at the start of the year, looking to better times ahead. And it was to have a feeling of positivity and looking forward. And I was really happy to write it. And we had, as I wrote it for him, we thought, well, we better have a session, just a rehearsal. But it was lockdown, so we couldn't actually meet together. So we did it on Zoom, just like this. And he was sitting with his cello, and I was at the piano, and it was a cello and piano, and it had about a 2-bar intro. And we started to rehearse it together. And I played the first 2-bar intro. And as he was about to come in, he just stopped. And I said, "Oh, why have you stopped, Stephen? Why, why have you stopped? Was it not right, the intro?" And he said, no. It was just, you're a semitone higher than me. And what happened was the way it was transmitting my music to him was in the wrong key. And it was a semitone higher. So if he had been playing, it would have clashed horribly and sounded like some awful mess, because we were in the wrong key, and it would have just clashed. So he just had to stop. And of course, rehearsal ended there. There could be no rehearsal because we couldn't play in the same key. It was very strange.
So the Zoom had sort of slightly altered the frequency, presumably.
Slightly altered the frequency. And I didn't know at the time, but it also altered the frequency of my voice. So I sounded like Minnie Mouse, apparently. But I had no idea I sounded like Minnie Mouse. And of course, I hadn't actually met in person or spoken before, so he probably thought I always sounded like that.
Oh, no.
So it was only after we realised what had gone wrong and that my how it was broadcasting, how it was transmitting to him was incorrect, and I was able to adapt it, that we realised so there we go. It was one of those. We found it still went fine.
Let's get back to the work that so many people watching right now will know and love, and that's The Traveller, of course, which was commissioned by Viking. So tell us the story. I mean, how did you and Viking get together? Because you were composer in residence to Classic FM, the radio station.
Yeah.
And I think it was through one of their concerts that you met the Viking people.
That's exactly right. Viking were sponsoring the Classic FM live concert at the Albert Hall, which they do very regularly. In fact, they've got one coming up this September. So you should get along there. It's absolutely wonderful. Really brilliant concert. And they often sponsor Classic FM Live. And I'm their composer in residence. And at the time I was involved in the concert and premiering one of the new pieces that I'd written for them. And Karina was there. And of course, being she's passionate about music, as is Tor. And they watched the concert, and then they came up afterwards and said, would you be interested? How would you feel about maybe writing some music for us? And I was so excited by this. This is absolutely wonderful. I could write a piece of music for Viking cruises, their signature music, a theme for them. And they didn't have a theme. And it's interesting that they didn't have a theme, because you would think that, for advertising, for broadcasting, you'd want music that especially says Viking, that sums up their ethos and that sums up the adventures that you have on board. And so I said I'd love to do it, and they very kindly showed me around. We went on a beautiful river ship, a beautiful ocean ship, in order to get some inspiration for what.
Had you ever been on a cruise before?
No, this was what's so exciting. I hadn't. So I was able to go on board and experience the atmosphere, and it's very, very, as you know, Anne, because I know you've been on board, completely wonderful it is to be enjoying these ships. And I came home, we went to Paris on a river ship, we went to Barcelona on an ocean ship, and I experienced the complete wonderful Viking experience, came home and wrote the theme. And it tells the story of how I felt when I was on board, the morning light, waking up, just the gorgeous atmosphere on board, listening to the sound of the ocean, the bird song, the relaxation, all the brilliant memories that I had on board, the adventure, the drama, all that was packed into a piece. And when you hear it, I hope that you go on your own little Viking adventure. You go on your own.
But I don't know how you as a composer even start. Do you go to sleep at night and wake up with a theme in your head? Or did you look out at the river and the ocean and think of where did you even start? And if you were to go back and look at your early notes, would they resemble anything like the finished piece?
Not too dissimilar, actually, funnily enough, because I sketch it all on manuscript paper at the piano. So I just sit with a pencil and manuscript paper and try to shape it. So it's a bit like drawing a picture, really. I sketch it and I get the harmony and the melody and the chords and the idea. and something usually sticks, and it's whatever I often just try out ideas. Sometimes it's just improvising. It's having an idea in my mind, thinking of the experience, painting a picture in my head, and then translating that into music. And I love to have a picture in my head. And that's why film music or TV music really appealed to me, because it's such a gift when you're given that, because you have a drama, a location, and the story, and the actors, and the period, and all that feeds into what you do musically. And then I'm able to take that and shape it into something that fits with the picture.
So does it help if you are sitting at a piano as you are now and you just sort of do something, or do you hear it in there first?
Well, it's a mixture of the two. I hear it in here and then I play it. For example, I mean, I can do, this probably sounds crazy, but we could try it.
Yeah.
Give me a scenario of something. Think of your favorite, I don't know, it could be, you know, going on a lake or a thunderstorm or something. I will think of that and play you something that tries to sum up what you just tell me. I know that it's a bit of an ask, but
no, all right. Sydney Opera House, beautiful balmy evening, coming out. This is just a memory I have, coming out of concert in the Opera House, absolutely hot, sultry evening, and you can see thunderclouds in the distance, and it's the first time I ever saw an electrical storm, and you can see the clouds coming nearer and nearer, and although you've had a wonderful, wonderful, ecstatic evening, you know it's going to end in drama.
Oh, I love that. Okay, here we go. 30 seconds of I'll try and do it in 30 seconds of your Sydney Opera House adventure. Here we go.
Oh yes, I can see those thunderclouds looming. Yes.
No, that's a very sort of crass way of doing it, Anne. But what I was trying to show you is that you think of an idea and you try and translate it into something musical. That was not anything that I would ever keep or use, but it's a germ of something, and there might be something in that I might use. You know, I might go to. You know, I might find something in there, the chords, the shape of the melody. There might be something that then starts to sound original and different. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a hook or a chord or a melody that sounds fresh. And of course, it's hard. A lot's been done in music. You know, it's hard to find that new tune.
So all right. So when Viking asked you to write a theme that they could always use, do you, like Mozart used to have to do in the olden days, do you have to think about your budget? In other words, do you have a big orchestra, or are you limited to a string quartet or a soloist with some sort of an arrangement behind him? Do you have to think that way first?
Sometimes, certainly on a film, budget is important. You know, there's no point trying to write a big orchestral score if they can only afford 4 musicians or 3 musicians, a trio. You have to contain it. And sometimes that containing it can be helpful. It's sometimes quite nice to have, you know, boundaries. Otherwise, you can do anything. But with The Traveller, I knew that it needed an orchestral. You needed that palette of sound for all the different experiences that you get on board, the river, the ocean, all that. I wouldn't have been able to express that all with just 1 instrument or 2 instruments. It needed that color palette. So it does vary from project to project. But yes, you do have to keep budget in mind. And television, film, albums, everybody has a budget these days, and you have to work within it.
And do you think of a particular soloist that you know? I mean, you mentioned Sibelius there. You must know some particular soloists who really, you know, switch you on. Yes. Do you think of them? I do,
absolutely. And I write for them. A lot of the musicians that I use regularly because I love their playing. You know, the cellist that I use, Justin Pearson, I write for him. The viola player, Phil Dukes, I write for him. the players that I work with regularly, I know their sound, and I know how to write for them because I know how to make them sound good.
That's
and that's your job as a composer, to make other musicians sound good. Write them so that they play and they sound great, and that's what your job is.
So when you came to record The Traveller, you did it at Abbey Road, which can take a very big orchestra, and certainly I think your orchestra was something like 75, 76 strong, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was huge.
What was it like recording at Abbey Road? I know it's a mecca still for so many musicians. They always say, I did this at Abbey Road. It's still such an amazing place to go to and be in, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. I mean, the hardest thing is actually getting into the studio because of all the tourists outside that are still taking pictures. And of course, it's got the immense history. But when you're in there, your job as a composer is just to get the job done. So you don't think about you're in Abbey Road. I just think about the music that I'm trying to record and getting it to sound great. That's what my job is. But it is a fabulous studio, and it is wonderful recording there. And there are many, we're very fortunate in London. We've got Abbey Road, we've got Air Linter Studios, Angel Studios, where I used to record, is opening up again. So we've got 3 really fabulous big recording studios.
Piece of video of the making of The Traveller, or the recording of The Traveller behind the scenes. Let's have a look at that now.
In London, there's one crosswalk that's known to virtually everyone in the world, and it leads to the iconic Abbey Road Studios. Yes, that one. We came to join Debbie Wiseman, the noted UK composer. It was time to record Den Reisende, The Traveller, celebrating Viking's 20th anniversary. But before moving forward, we step back into the studio's illustrious past.
This is where the Brits did all their records. Oh, that's the Lady Madonna piano. Okay. So it kind of looks like they just left.
Between 1962 and 1970, Abbey Road Studios became almost a second home for the Fab Four, while they churned out a remarkable series of hits.
The whole album Revolver was done in Studio 3, which is just upstairs. So yeah, within this building they did 200 and something songs.
In these hallowed halls, the imagination overflows with visions of the improvisational days, late night, and legendary personalities that combined to create history.
Very nice. Really lovely.
Filled with inspiration, it was time to embark upon our own creative journey. Studio 1 was our home for the day, an enormous space where music for movies like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, and others were recorded. Working against time, every moment mattered, so the extensive setup for the musicians began early. The Traveller was written for a 75-piece orchestra. It's a complex composition requiring precision and spirit from every note. To help achieve the sound Debbie envisioned, she chose London's National Symphony Orchestra.
The most challenging thing about doing any project like this with the size of orchestra is I have a limited amount of time with which to get the sound together. Speed is of the essence. Okay, folks, I will stick this one down, so it'll be a take. Here it comes, nice and quiet, please.
And that was The Traveller being recorded at the famous Abbey Road Studios. Must be one of those pinch me times that you always remember how it went. Debbie, interestingly, you were talking about the restrictions of lockdown and how musicians have managed to get over those restrictions and actually make something of them. And there was a choral version put together of The Traveller, wasn't there?
There was, and we did that during lockdown, and it was such a wonderful experience because a fabulous group, Miriam, Elise Nakarato, put together a whole group of singers from all over the world who were able to sing. I did an arrangement for them of The Traveller. We put words to it, which again, just for me, just summed up the experience that we had on board. And they sung their individual parts in whichever part of the world they were individually, and then a fantastic editor put them all together and created the online version that you hear, which is the choral version of The Traveller. It was brilliantly done.
Who did the words? Did you write the words then?
Yeah. And well, it had to fit, you see, it had to fit the melody perfectly. And that would have been quite a hard job for anyone who hadn't experienced the whole.
And who were the singers?
Well, the singers were myriad. They were singers from all over the world, chosen by Elise. And she's quite experienced at doing this. You know, she's quite experienced at putting together these choral adventures, choral, you know, extravaganzas. And everybody was singing at home their individual parts, and then they created the whole online. It worked so brilliantly.
Well, you say that, but I recognise one or two faces from Viking.
Oh, there you go.
Two of them, and they've got voices.
She obviously has a lovely little black book of singers that are really good and can perform. And they follow. It's quite a technical job, and you know, they have to follow the tempo, and they have to stick to their line that they're singing. It's quite tricky to do, but if you're a good singer and you understand what you're doing, it's possible, and they created it.
It was absolutely phenomenal. Let's have a little look at it. This is The Traveller, but it's called The World Traveller.
Such special memories, those cases now known. Such precious days are these, the times that we know. The future is unseen, and life is fragile. Still we pursue the dream.
You see, I love that, because you see different people in their different backgrounds during lockdown all over the world.
All over the world, yeah. And that was Elise in the middle conducting, and she did such a brilliant job of gathering together the singers and then making it work. You know, they were literally all over the world. We had people in Australia, New Zealand, London, Europe, everywhere. And it was such a lovely experience.
Okay, well, let's fast forward now to one of your newest compositions, The Music of Kings and Queens. Can you tell us what's it all about? And it's got Helen Mirren and Damian Lewis involved as well.
Yes. Well, this was another project that came about through being involved with Classic FM as their composer in residence. And I've done 2 albums with them. One was the musical Zodiac. The second one was The Glorious Garden with Alan Titchmarsh. And we were looking for a third project and that we could do together. And of course, it was coming up to the Queen's 95th birthday. And next year's her Platinum Jubilee, as you know. But this was to mark her 95th birthday. And I've been involved in the various pageants that have been going on at Windsor leading up to the 95th. Sadly, they had to be cancelled this year and last year. But prior to that, I was involved, and I will be for next year for the Platinum Jubilee. And Simon Brooks Ward, who is the creative genius behind all these pageants, we were having lunch one day, and I said, look, I'm looking for a new project for Classic Everyone. What do you think? Have you got any ideas? And he said, well, it's the Queen's 95th birthday. Have you thought about doing anything about kings and queens? Maybe that would inspire some music. And the minute he said it, I felt excited. And that's always the key, that you feel, there could be something there. Yeah. And so I asked Simon to write 12 individual little stories about the 12 monarchs that he felt could tell the story. So could he please choose, because he has a huge knowledge and great, I mean, he's not a historian, but a great knowledge about the monarchy and kings and queens over the years. And he wrote 12, he chose 12 monarchs, starting with William the Conqueror and ending with our present day Elizabeth II. And he wrote pieces for me, just half a side of A4 really, about these monarchs, which he hoped would inspire the music. And I popped them on my music stand here. And I started to write, and I instantly realized that we had an idea, told the idea to Classic FM and Decca, who both thought, yes, we must do this. And that's what we did. So I wrote the 12 Kings and Queens music based on Simon's inspiring little pieces that he gave me. And then we thought, oh, it would be great if they were actually narrated on the album so that the listener can also enjoy the story that inspired the music before they hear the piece. And we thought, oh, who could we get to narrate on the album? And we made a list, and top of our list were Helen Mirren and Damian Lewis.
You got them.
Amazingly, yeah. We were so lucky that they were around and said yes. And so that was just the icing on the cake. And they narrate. So they introduce each monarch. We've got Henry VIII, we've got all the Georges, we've got William the Conqueror, Richard the Lionheart, and we end with Elizabeth II. And it was to mark her 95th birthday. It's been.
Do we know if the Queen's heard it?
She has been given a copy. Yeah, we do know she's been given a copy. So I'm hoping that she's enjoying it right now with her feet up, cup of tea, sitting on the sofa listening. It's got to happen, hasn't it?
Even a G&T. Well, we could do the same, actually. We'll take a quick look at the trailer for it, at least, to give everybody a taste.
We may not remember most of our prime ministers, politicians, military, or even groundbreaking scientists, but we will have a good grasp of our kings and queens who have shaped our nation. This is their story and their legacy.
God save our gracious Queen.
Long live our noble Queen. God save the Queen.
It looks fabulous. I mean, you were one of only a few composers, I think, to write the new water music for the Queen's Diamond Jubilee pageant back in 2012. That's the one where they all got soaked, isn't it? Or was that?
They didn't get soaked. Yeah, I mean, it was one of those days that I can just remember it so vividly because it's so memorable, and everybody's got probably a similar memory. But we were out on a boat on the river. There were 11 musicians that had been commissioned to write new water music, which we were going to play on the boat, and we were all it's going to be this fantastic spectacle, which it was. And of course, as we started to set sail, the heavens opened, and everybody got soaked on the boat. But the musicians were playing, and the cellist was playing with a soaked shirt, and everybody was just rising to the occasion. And it was that fantastic British spirit.
Yeah.
Stop just because of a bit of rain. Come on, we're British. It rains all the time, and people were lining the riverbanks in their outdoor clothes and waving and smiling, and nobody seemed to mind that it was chucking it down. But it was just the most incredible timing.
It really did chuck it down,
and it should have been sunny.
Talk about water music.
Exactly.
Tell me about To Olivia, because I did a bit of research on that. It's not a movie I know yet, but it's you were commissioned to write the music for it, and it's actually it's a very sad movie in some ways. It's about Roald Dahl and his wife Patricia Neal, and they had two beautiful daughters. One was Olivia, and the other was Tessa, who's quite famous in this country. And it's a very sad story. You were commissioned to write the music for it. Not an easy job, really,
No,
because you don't want it to just be about grief and pain.
Yes, it is about grief and pain, and Hugh Bonneville and Keeley Hawes are absolutely wonderful in it. They completely take you on their particular story. It's beautifully directed by John Hay. And it took me a long time to come up with that theme. And it wasn't one of the ones that came immediately. And it wasn't that it wasn't speaking to me as a film, because it was. It was just I couldn't quite find the melody. And I was trying different things out on the director, on John, and nothing was sticking. And he was very patient, actually, with me. And eventually one evening, we'd had a chat on the phone. And he'd said a couple of things which sparked a thought, went to the piano, wrote something, and I thought, oh, this could be it. And I called him up, and it was really late, probably way past his bedtime. It must have been, I don't know what time it was, very late at night. And I said, oh, what do you think, John? And I played him the theme down the phone, and he had such a positive reaction to it. I just knew that was good. Yeah, that I'd got it. And that was a springboard for the rest of the score, but it took a while. And of course, Roald Dahl, you know, it covers a period of his life when he was writing Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and the success that he had, that coupled with the tragedy that occurred in their life and the grief they had to go through. And yeah, beautifully done, very sensitively done. Yeah, very, very proud of that.
I'm going to watch it now, even though I know I'll probably have to have a box of Kleenex.
I'm afraid so, yeah.
But the director, as you said, he said that everything after filming finished was done in lockdown. All the visual effects and the orchestra, he said, we had to do it all by Skype. We had to record the orchestra 3 meters apart in 2 blocks. So we had half the orchestra one day and half the next, and then locked them together at a later date. Amazingly, he said, they managed to do it. I'll never know how musicians do that.
No. That's absolutely right. That was one of the projects that we did like this. I was playing John the themes down Zoom, and luckily we've worked together before, so he sort of knew that he could trust the music. You know, I think it would have been much harder with a director that I hadn't met or hadn't had an experience of working with, because I know how he ticks, and he the same with me. So we have a lovely relationship, and so I think that helped a lot. But it was hard, and we did have to separate the strings from the brass and do them over separate days, and then piece it together at the end. Whereas normally we just have the whole orchestra, as we did with the Traveller, in the room at once, like you saw at Abbey Road. 80 musicians together at one time, playing like you normally play, but that wasn't possible. So we broke them into manageable chunks. I think that's the way to put it down.
A return to a normality is going to feel simple compared, I think. I mean, you're famous for doing a lot of memorable film and TV scores. And although we've been talking an awful lot about English history ones, actually, they are known worldwide, I think. Wolf Hall, for instance, Hilary Mantel's famous novels. You did the music for the BBC adaptation of that, which has been terrifically successful. That must have been an exciting one to be commissioned to do.
That was incredible. And again, it's working with Peter Kosminski, the director, who I've worked with a lot over the years. I think that was our 7th collaboration. Again, you know, if you find a director that you really work well with, it's such a brilliant experience, because it's a collaboration. It really is a proper collaboration. And the exciting thing is I've got a new project with Peter, which I'm working on at the moment, called Darkness Rising for Channel 4, which also stars Mark Rylance. So I'm really looking forward to that. We're working on that at the moment. They're just finishing the filming of that right now.
How does that process work? I mean, when a film isn't finished and they haven't really got any rushes to show you, does the director sit down with you, and well, when he can sit down with you, and say, well, this is a dark movie and I want to evoke this, I'm thinking of that. How much does he give to you, and how much leeway does he let you just run away with?
Well, it's a really good question, and it varies hugely from director to director. So there is no norm, you know, there is no, this is the way it works. It can be anything from, for example, on Father Brown, the BBC series that's been very long running. I worked with the team there, Will Trotter and Kerry Merrick, came up with the theme first, based on something that was just mentioned in passing about it. Oh, it's got a kind of Ealing comedy feel to it. Yeah. And I sat down at the piano and I thought, oh, Ealing comedy, it should be quite, you know, I came up with this sort of... sort of slightly odd, slightly quirky little theme, and that was based entirely on just a throwaway comment by the team. But with Peter, he very much likes working early on, and he comes over. We sit around the piano and we talk about. I mean, with Wolf Hall, I'd written Anne's theme, I'd written Cromwell's theme before he'd shot any of the film. He wanted it early on so that he could take it on set with him, and he could, you know, he could live with it a little bit before he came back and then went into the edit.
Ah, that's interesting. So it's a two-way street then. I mean, you can influence the way he shoots a scene as much as the way he shoots a scene could influence your music. It depends on what comes first.
It's exactly that. Yeah, it can be it's a very different experience when I start early on, having read the script and sitting with Peter and coming up with themes. And again, the Wolf Hall theme, the main Cromwell theme, took a while to get to what it was. And I remember just improvising at the piano with Peter. And I did something like this. It was just something about that sort of slightly minimalist undercurrent that he liked, and he didn't want it to sound pastiche Tudor. He said, I want it to sound modern, almost as if we're experiencing it today, that we're not looking at these characters through a stained glass window, we're experiencing their stories and their drama now. And that's exactly how Hilary writes as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say that. That's how Hilary would have. Did you get to meet her at all? Did she have anything to do with the filming?
I did get to meet her there was an event at, I think it was the BFI, where we did a panel discussion. I got to meet her there, which was great. And of course, at various screenings afterwards. And I think, yes, she did go on set a couple of times and talk with Peter. And there was a very memorable moment where she came to see it for the first time in a private screening room. And I was sitting a couple of seats away from her in the cinema, and Peter was sitting behind me. And he was really nervous because Hilary hadn't seen it at all as a whole. You know, she'd seen probably little bits of it, but not as a whole. And I remember at the end, she was watching it and she just turned around to Peter and just did that thumbs up. And I could see the relief on his face that she was pleased with it. Because, of course, it was a huge responsibility taking on that book. Been such a hit, not only as a novel, but then as a stage play in the theatre. And then to take on that and deliver it as a TV series, it was a huge responsibility. And I think we all felt we didn't want to let her down. We didn't want to, wanted to do it properly, do it justice.
Talking about challenges, what's it like being a female conductor in what must have been previously a very male-dominated world?
Well, it's not so much now a male-dominated world. I mean, I'm sure you watch the first night of the proms where you see a female and we've had Marion Alsop and all these other conductors conduct at the proms now. So now it's become much more normal. But you're right, up until maybe 5-10 years ago, it's very rare to see a female conductor. I never thought of it as anything unusual. When I started out, I had to conduct because there was nobody else to do it. The budget wouldn't have stretched for me to hire another musician to conduct it for me. So I sort of had to do it, and I learned on the job, a bit like we were talking about Zoom, sort of learning on the job. You just sort of have to do it, and you find a way to learn. And of course, being a composer and conducting your own music, you've got a great advantage because you know what it is that you need to deliver. And I'm happy to say now that in orchestras, you see musicians that are playing what were traditionally male-dominated instruments like trombone or double bass, or I mean, you were talking about saxophone and trumpets even were male-dominated. Now, full of female musicians playing those instruments. There is no divide anymore.
But, I mean, in the olden days, if you went to a classical concert, you waited for the conductor to come on. He was very formal. He had his, he had the full works on, didn't he? The tailcoat and everything. And you only ever saw him from the back. And he never really connected with the audience in a big way. But things have changed. And you do love to connect with your audience. You love to tell them the story of the piece you're about to play. Funny little stories as well. You like to have some sort of rapport with your audience, don't you?
Well, I think it's important that we did a lovely concert, which again you can get on Viking TV, which we did at Cadogan Hall. And I was fortunate to conduct the National Symphony Orchestra. They were completely wonderful performances from them on that night. And the idea was, of course, the most important thing is the music and what you're playing and what the audience can enjoy, but helping them, maybe tell them a little nugget of information about what it is that they're going to be hearing first, and chatting with them. It somehow, for me, it just helps the whole experience. I want, when I go to a concert, I want to feel I know the people a little bit that are there on stage, that you get to know them a little bit. You don't want it to intrude on the music making, but you want to be able to experience a little bit of what they're experiencing. And that's what it's about for me, to be able to just introduce the music, let people know. They probably know all about it anyway, but if they don't, here's a little nugget of information that you might not know, or something that you might find helps you enjoy it just that little bit more.
I mean, as you said, the full concert is available on Viking TV. You just have to have a look through and you'll find it. But I've got a little clip from it now when you're introducing a piece of Sibelius. And again, here you connect with the audience, you tell them a little bit of the backstory to what they're just about to hear. And this, to me, makes a classical concert for me. Let's have a look at it.
Our musical journey now takes us to southeast Finland, to Karelia, a beautiful wilderness filled with history and vibrant peasant music. A young Jean Sibelius loved this place, choosing it as the destination for his honeymoon. At its premiere in 1896 at the Imperial Alexander University in Helsinki, Sibelius' Karelia Suite was a huge success, but the behaviour of the Finnish audience was far from ideal. Sibelius wrote in a letter to his brother, "You couldn't hear a single note of the music. Everyone was on their feet, cheering and clapping." Feel free to do the same this evening. We're going to perform two movements from the suite, an intermezzo, which depicts a procession of labourers travelling to pay taxes to a Lithuanian prince. The music starts with beautiful shimmering strings, conjuring up an image of vast snow-laden tundra and scattered lakes. You can almost sense and smell the pine and the birch forests. And then we're going to play an exhilarating march, originally intended to depict a city under siege. To me, though, this music seems very light and sunny and exciting and patriotic.
Oh, that's lovely. And as I say, that you can hear the full version anywhere on Viking TV. Just look for it. We'll put lots of links at the end of this as well. What about writing for unusual instruments? I know you've, when you did the music for Arsène Lupin, the movie, you used a cymbalom and a glass harmonica. You like to be a bit experimental?
Well, sometimes, you know, you need to find a new colour for a film or a TV show. You need to find something that suggests something otherworldly or ethereal or magical. And Arsène Lupin was one of those films. If you don't know the name Arsène Lupin, he is a kind of French James Bond meets Raffles. He's a gentleman jewel thief. And I wanted something that suggested the diamonds and the mystery and all that. And if you haven't heard a glass harmonica or a cymbalom, they have that little sort of magical, mysterious color to them. And that it suggested it to me. It wasn't that I was particularly looking for, oh, I must use an unusual instrument in this, you know, to be clever. It wasn't that. It wasn't that I was trying to be, you know, experimental or different. It just suggested it to me. And I didn't know much about those instruments. I had to sort of phone up these lovely musician friends and say, look, I'd really quite like to use this instrument. Do you know anyone that can play it? And then they put me in touch with somebody. I learnt about the range and the best way to make it sound good and wrote for it. And of course, it adds another colour, another dimension.
Yeah, it's a bit exotic. When you did a programme that we in Britain know very well called Desert Island Discs, it's on the BBC Radio 4 in Britain. But just to explain to anyone watching who doesn't know it, it supposes that you take somebody such as yourself and you put them on a desert island. They're stranded there, but they are allowed a certain amount, is it 10 or 12, I think, recordings of music. And they have to give the reasons why those recordings are important to them. Now, your choices went from Mozart right through to the Beatles. Tell us more then. I mean, what have been your influences and why are certain bits of music important to you?
Well, I started very young when I was probably about 5, 6, 7, being introduced to music. I didn't come from a musical family at all, but they loved music. And we went on a family holiday and there was a sort of little bashed up old piano in the corner of the dining room. And I became completely obsessed with this piano and wanted to go to it all the time. Instead of like most kids on a family holiday, they want to go on the beach or they want to go making sandcastles or go swimming. I wanted to go to the piano. And I was probably the most annoying little girl in the hotel at that time because all I wanted to do was go and bash this piano. And when we came back from the holiday, my mum said, we've got to get her a piano. She obviously loves it. And we, after a bit of toing and froing, we got the piano. And of course, I became completely just obsessed with music. And I think most professional musicians, you have a similar story. It becomes the most important thing to them. And it did. And although I went through school and did the usual, academic stuff, music was always the most important subject for me at school. And I knew probably from about the age of 8 or 9 that I wanted to be a musician. And I think, as I say, most professional musicians, they do, not all, some start later, but a lot do have that in them. From the language felt very natural to me. These little black dots on the stage. I was terrible at French or English or, doing other languages at school, absolutely hopeless. I couldn't get to grips with it at all, but I understood the language of music. And of course, Desert Island, this is a great opportunity, as you know, to be able to choose. And it's hard to choose your 8 favorite tracks because there are so many. But I decided I was only going to choose ones that were particularly personally relevant. So it wasn't just music that I loved, but they had a story to me attached to them.
So which Mozart did you pick?
Oh, it was one of my favourite piano pieces, a piano sonata that I played. And it was one of the ones I think that I played at an audition to get into Guildhall when I was desperate to get into music college. And the Guildhall School of Music and Drama was where I went in the end. And that was one of my audition pieces. And I remember being completely so scared at the audition that, with the pedals on the piano, you've got to pedal. My right leg was shaking so badly that I couldn't pedal because, you have to keep your foot still when you're pedaling. I was so nervous I couldn't pedal. And I knew then that probably I wouldn't be a concert pianist, because what you have to have when you're a performer is nerves of steel. So you go out and you perform, and you can contain those nerves, and that, because everybody gets it. It's the adrenaline rush. And I knew then I wanted to be a composer, not a performer, because that, the idea of going on stage and doing that every night would not. No.
Yeah, like you say, nerves are still. And which Beatles song did you choose?
Oh, I chose Eleanor Rigby, and that was because when I was learning the piano, one of my mum's friends was a very successful sort of music arranger and conductor, and he brought me over as a present a gift of Beatles tunes arranged for tiny hands when I was learning. And Eleanor Rigby, if you remember the tune, all the notes are very close together, so you haven't got big leaps between the notes, and which is very useful if you've got little tiny hands if you're a kid. And I learnt that. That was one of the first ones I learnt from the book. And it just somehow, instead of just learning repertoire like Haydn and Mozart and playing the little piano sonatas and all that stuff and scales and arpeggios that you do when you're learning, it somehow introduced me to other music at the time, pop songs that I'd heard my mum and dad play, and it kept the interest really alive and made it so enjoyable and such fun. And I worked through that book of Beatles tunes, and a lot of them actually are very simple like that. And you can just pick out the notes and you can find the tunes, and they're so beautifully memorable.
I know you're very interested in the teaching of music. You're president of Making Music, and I think you're patron of Soundabout, which is another charity which helps youngsters, particularly disabled youngsters, learn through music. And there was a tweet that you tweeted a while ago where you were a bit disgusted with the fact there was a survey, I think, which found that so few children in the UK knew who Mozart was.
I know. It is shocking, isn't it? But the trouble is that sometimes, and it actually leads on very nicely from what I was saying about making music fun and enjoyable. And the fact that I was given this book of Beatles tunes suddenly made it fun. It wasn't just something you had to do. It wasn't an academic study. It's not about doing all the time. That is a little arpeggio that you practice, and it helps your finger work and all that sort of stuff. But music is also enjoyable and fun. And I think it's all down to teaching. And if in schools they create an atmosphere of fun around the music, and that classical music is hugely exciting. It doesn't just have to be pop music. It doesn't just have to be what's in the charts. Classical music is where everything comes from anyway. It's the beginning of music. And it's hugely exciting for kids to hear full symphony orchestras if they get the opportunity to do it. And most kids, the first opportunity they get to hear a full symphony orchestra is when they go to the cinema. They might be watching Harry Potter, and in the soundtrack is a full symphony orchestra playing John Williams's brilliant score. And they experience it then and love it. So why not take them, to hear more live music so that they the great.
That leads nicely into the next clip I wanted to play, which was another one from that concert where you again are interacting with your audience and you're telling them a little bit about Strauss and then leading into, well, a tune we all know all over the world so well. Let's just have a look at that.
I did mention at the start of our concert that our journey would also be a little bit by train. And for our last piece, I've chosen a piece by Edward Strauss called Bahn frei, which translated loosely into English means make way or clear the track. The Strauss family capitalized on the public's interest in travel on newly built railways, and so numerous very fast musical compositions referencing steam trains were written. Those by Edward Strauss included titles such as Full Steam and Without Brakes. This particular polka was dedicated to the committee of a ball organised by officials of the impressively named Imperial and Royal Privileged Northern Railway. So here we go. You ready for this? All aboard. Hold tight.
See, I don't know why we call things classical music or pop music or rock music or whatever. It's just music, isn't it? And you know what you like.
Exactly right. That is so true. This is genre stuff, you know, when you put things in boxes, is very dangerous, I think, and not necessary. What you need to know is that you either like the music or you don't. And everybody has their own personal playlist and their own personal music that they love. And that's why Desert Island Disc is such a fabulous format, because everybody loves knowing what other people like to listen to. And it doesn't matter that you don't like some music or that you love others. It doesn't matter as long as you find something that really excites you. But I think to be introduced to it, so you can discard it if you want to, if you don't enjoy it, but to be introduced to it is very important.
Yes.
I think, and it's been proved that, you know, kids studying music, learning an instrument when they're young, even if they don't take it, most kids won't take it up professionally, but it helps all other areas of academia. It helps their memory, because often you memorize a scale or an arpeggio. It helps their mental arithmetic, because you're counting in bars, and it's very structured music. So it helps all sorts of other, and language actually. So it helps all sorts of other academic studies. So it really is hugely valuable to be able to learn an instrument and enjoy classical music. I'm sorry I called it classical, but to enjoy
music, yeah.
Shall we say? Or
yes.
music.
You are, of course, a Viking godmother of the longship Herja. Is that how we say it?
Herja, yes, absolutely. We are both very proud.
We are both godmothers, which is wonderful. Yeah, that must have been an extraordinary time. I mean, had you ever heard, for instance, I never had, that ships have godmothers?
No, and it was very thrilling. Oh gosh, it was so thrilling to go to Koblenz with everybody, and you know, just throw the champagne on the side of the boat and everybody cheers. It was just the most magical thing. And no, I didn't know that there were godmothers. And of course, you're just hoping that the champagne goes, you know, fabulously well and everybody cheers, which thankfully it did. And it was just, I'm sure you had the same experience, Anne, just the most thrilling event.
Yeah, absolutely. You pinch yourself. How did I get here? But I have noticed from a lot of the photographs I've been looking at of you, getting your various awards from the Royal Academy of Music, I think, and you've got your OBE. You've got an MBE first and then an OBE. In most of these lovely photographs of you receiving these awards, you're wearing the most gorgeous hats. You clearly have something for hats.
I love hats. I've got a ridiculously large collection of hats. It's far too embarrassing even to tell you how many hats I've got, because I've been collecting them over the years, and I absolutely love hats. I somehow feel, and I don't know whether it's because I've got quite difficult hair, but I sometimes feel it sort of finishes off an outfit. Oh gosh.
Oh no.
It sort of finishes off an outfit. Do you know what I mean? It finishes off.
Yes. It's the crowning glory, isn't it?
Well, exactly. And I love wearing hats. And I know some people don't like them. And they say, oh, I can't wear a hat. You know, they don't suit me. But I think hats suit everybody. I think you can always find a hat to suit you.
Oh, I don't know about that. No, see, I would challenge you on that. I can't find a hat that suits me at all.
I bet you could. I bet if we went shopping, Anne, one day, I would find you the most
glorious. That's great. Yeah. Two Viking godmothers going shopping together. I think that would be quite extraordinary.
And we come away with two fabulous hats. I can guarantee it.
All right. Okay. Well, that's a challenge. Thank you for that. Just before we go on to some questions, but we've got lots of questions from people. Tell me about the podcasts that you're doing.
Yes, well, this was something that was inspired by the lockdown. When all the lovely Viking guests couldn't travel, we had the idea to come up with, well, we can go on these journeys. Let's imagine an adventure that happens on the ships. We dreamt up an imaginary guest called Elizabeth Drinkwater, who goes on the Viking ships and has wonderful adventures. And each podcast is threaded with classical music. And so we again, it's sort of similar to what I would do with a film score, telling a story, and then the music is threaded through. And it was great fun to do. I hope that the Viking guests enjoyed it during lockdown. They're still on Viking TV. You can listen to all of them. There's 6 adventures of Elizabeth Drinkwater, yes, on board, surrounded by gorgeous music.
So some questions from Mel in Prague. What are your career highlights?
Well, it's hard always to pick one. And I would say, obviously it was important. Wolf Hall was a huge moment because it was such a fabulous series. One of the early films I did was a film starring Stephen Fry, who I've collaborated a lot over the years, called Wild. And that was a wonderful career highlight because it's sort of, sometimes things create other things, as you probably know in your career. Sometimes one thing spirals something else and you start doing more because of that. And that was one of those projects. And being Classic FM's composer in residence has been the most thrilling experience.
Yes.
Had all the opportunity to do lots of different albums with them, and all the lovely events and the concerts. And I've got to say, because it is genuinely a career highlight, being involved with Viking and writing their signature music and being their godmother, absolutely one of the most thrilling things ever.
I certainly understand that one. From Daryl Simmons in New Jersey, what is it like to conduct at the Royal Albert Hall? Oh, and if I can add one of my questions, because this is just a girly question, and please forgive me, but obviously when you're conducting, we're looking at your back all the time. So when you choose an outfit, you must think about that.
You're absolutely right, Anne. It's exactly what I think about, is you're looking at a conductor's back. And so it has to be quite elegant from the back. And I do think about it because you want to look comfortable as well. And most importantly, at the Albert Hall is getting on and off the stage. And sometimes they put obstacles in your way, because it's generally men that don't have to worry about these things. There might be like a wire, if they're recording it, they'll put a wire between you and the podium, and it's a real trip up material. So I always do a sort of dummy run. I do a little rehearsal in the shoes that I'm going to be wearing, because men just wear, normal shoes and they don't have heels, but with a heel, it creates problems sometimes. And I like to wear a little heel because I'm little. I like to wear a little heel. Not gigantic 3-inch stilettos, obviously, for conducting, but a little sort of heel. And so I'll do a little test run going on and off the podium while nobody's looking, just before the concert starts, to make sure there aren't any wires, leads, because the worst thing, and everybody worries about it, is walking up to a podium and falling over. And it can happen so easily.
Never happened.
It hasn't happened. No, there's been a little sort of wobble once where I couldn't quite get up. Or there was again, something where it wasn't quite easy access onto the podium, so there was a slight wobble, but not a complete fall over yet. But I'm sure it'll happen one day.
Well, but I mean, you do have to do a lot of walking on and off, especially if there are lots of encores, don't you? And you've got to be able to do it with grace. But it's quite a long way to walk, and as you say, steps involved.
Steps involved, getting up to the podium, looking elegant, all that stuff you have to think about. But then once the music starts, all that's forgotten, and it's just about the music making. And the great thing about the Albert Hall, even though it's a huge space and it holds, I think, 6,000 people, it does feel quite intimate as well. And depending on where you're sitting, if you're where the promers are in the arena area, or if you're right at the back, or even in the gallery right at the top, there's a sort of intimacy to it, and it's something about the acoustics and the way it sounds quite close. The music sounds close, even if you're far away. It's a very special venue, very, very special. I'm looking forward to playing there again. And of course, Viking have got Classic FM Live coming up in September, so lovely that music is coming back to the Albert Hall.
Another question is where you're going on your next holiday, and can you, when you're on holiday, ever put your work down?
I do put it down, but I don't stop thinking about it because I do enjoy the idea of, I take a little manuscript book with me, and a little bit, just so I can scribble down ideas when they come. Sometimes they don't go anywhere, those ideas, and sometimes they're rubbish and I just throw them out. But I do like to have a little pad with me just to And of course, we haven't got a holiday booked at the moment for obvious reasons, but I really, really hope I can go on a cruise. I really hope I can go on a Viking cruise. I just would love to do that at some time, maybe next year, because we actually haven't, you know, done a full.
Beginning to open up all over the world. And as I said, today is the day that opens up all over the rivers. So it's happening, isn't it? Another question from Hector and Viv in Pennsylvania. What's your favourite instrument? Is there one you would still love to be able to play yourself? And how long do you think it would take a committed adult to learn a new instrument?
My favourite instrument's probably the piano, simply because it feels like it's part of me. You know, it feels like it's my right arm. I sit and I write at the piano, and it because I'm a pianist, it just feels hugely natural. I did learn percussion for a while, timpani and xylophone and vibraphone and all that stuff when I was at music college. An instrument I would like to learn probably, was that the question, what I would like to learn?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to learn the violin properly, but that's a lifetime's work, so that's not going to probably happen. Although I write for strings a lot, so I get my strings, you know, my enjoyment of strings through writing for them. And how long would it take a committed adult? Well, funnily enough, when I was a kid, our next door neighbour started learning the piano, and we lived in a very small semi-detached house, and I was busy practicing my scales and arpeggios and my Haydn and my Beatles tunes. And next door was our neighbour who was learning the piano. And we would have these sort of piano fights, you know, who could play loudest, because it would come through the wall, because it was a small semi-detached house. I could hear him, he could hear me, and we'd try and drown each other out. And he started learning when he was in his, I reckon he probably was in his 40s or 50s, and became very proficient indeed. And I remember he was playing pretty well. I mean, really, you know, taking lessons, playing pretty well, and playing pretty difficult stuff. So it is possible to start in your later years and become quite proficient. Of course, it takes practice and dedication, like anything. The thing about music is it's not something you can learn in 5 minutes. It does take time and practice and dedication, and you have to put the hours in. And if you've got time to, maybe you don't have to practice 6 hours a day like a professional, but if you could practice half an hour a day or an hour, that's enough. And you slowly improve, slowly get better and enjoy it. And I know that a lot of people regret giving up learning an instrument when they were a kid, because it's so enjoyable to do, to play and be able to make music yourself. So I'd encourage anybody to if they can, learn an instrument.
Never too late. David Banks in New York asked an interesting question. He said, when you get in the car and drive, or when you just switch on the TV, how do you feel when you hear your own music being played?
Oh, well, that's always very exciting, especially, you know, if we were in the car and we're driving, we've got Classic FM on and they'll play a track. It's always very exciting. And it sort of feels, it's a bit like going to the cinema and watching a film that you've scored and hearing your work back. Now, I don't know if you do this, but I'm very critical of everything I write. And I always want to change things. And it's part of the perils of being a musician, is that you're always striving for this perfection, which you can never achieve, because nothing is perfect, ever. But you're striving to it, and you're striving to get better. So I will always, when I'm watching back a film score of mine, either in the cinema or it might come on TV, I'll always be wanting to change something. Oh, why did I do that? Oh, could I have done that better? Oh, that sounds wrong. Oh, I wonder if I could have done this. So it's a bit of a torture chamber for me, a bit. And it's not so bad with things on the radio, because generally there are other distractions going on as well. You might be driving and you're thinking of other things as well. But it can be a little bit, oh, should I have done that? Oh, I can think of a better ending now, you know. Oh, I can think of a better beginning.
Because that leads on to our next question for Peter Toulon in London. He says, can you ever relax and watch a film or TV programme without analysing the score?
Well, that's a definite no, because I generally do always try to analyse the score, or I try to work out what they were doing, what worked, what didn't work.
Because that's your business.
It's a busman's holiday, Anne. That's the problem.
Oh. You have to listen to things without music to get any relaxation.
Exactly. Going out, you know, to restaurants and places like that where they don't have canned music or pipe music or whatever it's called these days, muzak. I hate it because music, for me anyway, music should be enjoyed and listened to in its own right, not background music. I understand why they have it, and it adds atmosphere and it adds all that, and of course it does. But for me as a musician, I want it to be heard proper. I don't like the idea of music.
No. Look, I've kept you long enough, and it's been such fun talking to you. It really has. I'll leave you to your studio. Are you working today, or will you be able to relax now?
I'm working today. I'm writing Father Brown at the moment, new series, which is starting. I'm actually on episode 10 of the new series, which is going to be the 100th episode of Father Brown. There have been 100 episodes worldwide. It's a huge hit for the BBC, and it's been such fun. Mark Williams.
I noticed that behind you, you've got that great big TV screen with, at the moment, a Viking longboat on it. Yeah. But if you are writing to something that's already been shot, you'll put it up there and write to it?
It's exactly where it is. Yes, it's running for me on screen, and I fit the music to the picture. So there might be a car chase or an action sequence or a love scene or a drama, whatever. And I'm writing specifically to picture. So every sequence of the notes, every sequence of the melody and the harmony fits perfectly to the picture.
So incredibly technically proficient. I mean, all of the knobs and buttons behind you, is that you works that, or does somebody?
Well, it's Tony, my husband, who's much more technically proficient. I'm not technically proficient at all, but he is, and he manages to create an atmosphere where I can work without having to think about the technical side of things. I was trained as a musician, not as a computer expert, so I'm not really very good at all the technical side of things. But luckily, I have a husband who is. Hooray!
Yeah. Well, it's a very good double act, isn't it? But anyway, look, it's just been brilliant to talk to you. Thank you so much for talking to me today and telling me some of those lovely stories. But thank you for your music as well. And I know everybody who's watching at the moment, and maybe will watch later on during the week, is so, everybody concerned with Viking is so familiar with your music and loves it so much. And you give an awful lot of pleasure as people are sailing, enjoying their cruises. And let's hope we meet on one quite soon.
In a hat.
In a hat, very much.
I'm going to get you a gorgeous hat. You wait.
Big hat. Yeah, absolutely. It's a date. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. See you soon. Bye.
Yeah, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Bye.
And next week, I'm going to be chatting, well, to a very old friend of mine who I haven't met for some 35 years. Whilst I went on to continue my career in television, his took the most astonishing turn sideways, if you like. And he went from being a great TV director, who was wonderful to work with, to creating the worldwide phenomenon that is river dance. He is John McColgan, half of the amazing husband and wife team that literally invented river dance. And he'll tell us just what an amazing river journey he has been on, and how they are finally celebrating 25 years of this incredible dance sensation in theatres right throughout the world. So until we meet again, have a wonderful week wherever you are. Goodbye.